Watching God,
Right.
running out of other things you read, Raising the Sun,
Right.
and Native Son.
Okay.
So we read those, and we have seen different references to folklore, especially within Invisible Man and Their Eyes Were Watching God. And I was just wondering if you had any input on that, and especially we're focusing on Hurston.
Okay, so you have to give me a little more to run
Okay,
from here. I mean, Hurston was a folklorist, so, but, I mean, right away, I don't know, I mean, though I've read Invisible Man in Their Eyes, it's been a while, so I'm not going to be able to just pull from my head, oh, this is a reference to this.
Yeah, do you remember, but specifically like Hurston, like, she published books, for folklore. She published one from, like, the Caribbean. And
well, she right, what is it?
Mules.
Ride My Horse. The Caribbean one was, but she also was worked as a folklorist for the WPA.
Right.
She collected songs. She, and not only wrote about these things, and wrote about this stuff, right? And Mules and Men. She did this whole thing on hoodoo.
Yeah.
But you have to guide me here.
Okay.
I'll talk.
Let's talk about the origin of folklore.
Yeah, could you give us
and
like
kinda...
a brief history of it, maybe?
Of folklore?
For the context that we're studying. Specifically for the context that we're studying, not the whole folklore.
Yeah. In particular, the African folklore.
Right. Okay. Here's a feeble attempt.
I'm sorry.
To talk about African American, who should I look at? Should I look at you or you?
No, it's good.
It's
Okay.
either one
I'm just helping out.
Okay, I'm just wondering about how you want the camera angle,
Yeah,
because
just
I
focus on
realize
him,
this
not
is
me.
all.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, in talking about African American folklore, what we're realistically talking about is the expressive world that a Creole culture created in this country, that West Africans brought to these shores, carried with them an entire set of understandings, aesthetic understandings, spiritual understandings, moral and ethical understandings, that on these shores were transformed and adapted to create something very different. When we think about folklore as a term, what we tend to think about is the fullness of the expressive world of any community. So in this case, we're talking about the expressive world that West Africans, as they became African Americans, crafted to not only hold on to these pieces of the past, but to adapt, transform these pieces of meaning to the radically new situation in which they found themselves. And what this meant was transformations all across the board. Musically, there were foundational pieces of West African style that on these shores yielded whole new musics that bore no relationship overtly to West African musics, and yet structurally and stylistically borrowed from those musics. In the worlds of faith, the emergence of a practice of which Hurston was particularly enamored or interested in, the world of hoodoo, hoodoo and voodoo in its Caribbean and Catholic-based communities version, where basic understandings about the workings of nature and the workings of the supernatural found themselves reworked on these shores into new and different systems of belief. In looking at the emergence of African American Christianity and the particularities of the expression of that faith, once again there was a transformation of some understandings of style and approach that were rooted in West Africa, which became foundational to new understandings of African Americans here. One could look in that narrow way to arenas of belief and religious expression. One could look at foodways, one could look at language, one could look at color choices, one could look at design choices in the ways that dwellings are built, houses are decorated, walls are adorned. all of these features encompass the worlds of folklore. Add into that worlds of, among African Americans, a particular valuing of the eloquently spoken word. Add in a world of narrative tradition, of stories that take on particular focuses, take on particular patterns, and one only begins to chart what would be defined as African American folklore. So we look to food and faith, story, song, music, material culture, architecture, color choices, aesthetics of the body, dance, hair, all of these dimensions are encompassed in the term folklore.
So for like oral tradition, or how was it passed down? Was it passed down by written methods, or was it passed down mostly by mouth to mouth? Like, and why would they do it like that? Was it around like a family dinner? Was it around they had like a big ceremony?
Oh, the baseline practical answer to that question is, historically, we are only recently a literate world. That when one talks about African American traditions in West Africa, in most parts of West Africa from which the enslaved were brought, there were not traditions of writing. There was no tradition of inscribing known understandings, known truths. They were simply passed on through word of mouth, or not so simply passed on through people who were seen as experts of the word. There were those who were